morning, or at least it's morning here. Was taking a walk with the dog this morning and listening to one of my favorite speakers. And there was just this flood, this sense of, I don't really know what to call it. Let my earpiece in. Also testing out these new lapel mics. I'm decidedly less animated than I was in my last video. The energy moves up and down, becomes more intense, becomes quieter. I think what I wanted to cover today was blame, was being a victim, and what that's like to watch that transform here. Standard qualifier, of course, is that anything that's shared here is a perspective, and it's a perspective based on the patterns, habits, and conditioning of what's here. So if it doesn't apply, you can dismiss it as irrelevant. Don't take my word for anything. Always examine this stuff yourself. My whole life I felt like a victim, and if I were to list the traumas, like itemize them and write them down, I suppose I could really place myself into a really strong victim situation, into a victim identity. Holding on to that victim identity perpetuated a lot of separation and a lot of suffering here, a lot of anger, a lot of rage. And what began to happen as I processed and moved through this stuff, as the sense of self was beginning to see through, as the identity was seen as being something that was completely created out of thin air, or that had been created over time, that there wasn't anyone else on the other side of the apparent act that was, or omission of act that was done either to me, because of me, by me, all of that. In dealing with trauma, I realized at first there are absolutely steps to these, and I am not a trauma counselor. I can only report back on how it unfolded here and the observations here. But in dealing with trauma, the first thing was to understand, to start to see that there was in fact trauma. And for many, many years, in many different aspects of my life, the emotional makeup here, the conditioning, and my responses to the outside world, it was seen that at the time it just felt normal. It felt like that was the way the world was, and this is how I respond to the world. That's the cat who's crying right now to go outside. Everyone meet Maggot. Maggot, everyone. He does that. Maggot, you're interrupting a really important talk. Poor guy, he just wants to be heard. Like everyone does. And then it became very, very clear that there was trauma. And that was really, really hard at first to get my head around, to really ingest, because there was so much shame attached to it. The trauma had to have been my fault, was the message. How it went has to have been, because I had everyone around me telling me how bad I was, or how it wasn't good enough, or how I had made the mistake, and that was why they did what they did. But somehow or another, that I didn't perform the way that they expected me to, that I didn't live up to an imaginary standard that had been presented on me, and so on, and so on, and so on, into uh, infinite permutations of that. And then once I started to see that trauma, which was the first step, then there was the feeling of it, and the experiencing of it, and the releasing of it being stored in the body. And that became a whole other can of worms, really. I had no idea that all that stuff was in there. And somehow or another, I managed, after that first shift in prison so many years ago, to dodge and avoid and uh, find ways to continue to blame or allow that trauma to manifest, without really just addressing it, without letting it be, without seeing it clearly for what it was, which was stored energy in the body. And there was always a narrative that went with it. And so at some point, it began to come up. And when it came up here, I thought it was going to kill me, for sure. I did. Pernilla and I recorded an interview about what happened in that, which, if you want to see, is in it's in a playlist here. And I do need to qualify that that is not indicative of how this has to unfold for anybody. So my trauma began to be seen and began to be felt. That created a greater sense of clarity with which to look at things and to address future things that might come up. My videos all have animals in them. Hey, buddy, please don't tear the screen up. Okay, now he's stuck on the screen. Go on. Well, that's what you get for putting your feet up there, isn't it? I don't know how one is supposed to have a serious Dharma talk when there's a cat crawling on the screen. Okay. So, I think it's important, and I'm possibly speaking to the choir on this. I don't know who's watching this video, but generally speaking, trauma processing can re-invoke a sense of victimhood. And I have been very what's the word? I think it's I think that in trauma processing, for there to be actual resolution of it, healing, if you want to call it that, that it has to be done in conjunction with, some type of self-inquiry or some type of meditative process. If there isn't an investigation into the identity, then it can go a whole different way. And I have known people who have gone through therapy and have done nothing other than reify what is happening and at best create a pressure relief valve. But the underlying, because of the identity isn't being investigated, the underlying doesn't, I don't know, it keeps it somehow keeps its momentum. I think investigating the identity has to be incorporated. So recently, it's gotten to the point, I mean, I would say over the last 2 or 3 years, where first of all, it's very clearly seen that whatever's coming up, whatever emotions are being experienced here, there's no avoiding them. There's no longer any filters. There's no way to distract. I mean, it might be for a minute or so, but there's no denial mechanism that can actually shut down and close these things off. And as a result of that, the emotions here have gotten more intense at times. You know, I might have already talked about. So it's seen that you're just processing this stuff, and I don't even know if processing is the word. It's nor is it allowing. Allowing implies that there is someone that can either allow or not allow, and it doesn't feel that way here. It's just when it shows up, it's feeling, it's emotion. And what dawned on me really recently, in my last video, there was this very strong pushback, this sort of assertion of nothingness, but also through resolution of a sense of lack in the personality. And I called, the only phrase I could use it was, I felt like I was an agent of chaos. You know, like the disposition here, the predisposition to want to challenge things, to say, are you sure? Whatever you might be thinking, or conclusion you might form, or somebody that makes an absolute statement about something, especially in regards to all this. Are you sure? Are you 100% sure? I'm not sure that's the way that is, which is why I qualify with these are perspectives here. And in that, I think I left out, and which is why I'm sharing today, is wanting to simply say, there were all these causes and conditions. There were these people. There were these things that happened to me. Some it appeared that I was exclusively responsible for, which is not in absolute reality the case, but the appearance of that. And some that were just, you just went, I don't know where that came from. And I've communicated a sense of times of being very lonely or not um, wanting to do this by myself, or that sense of existential, the big alone with a big A. And it's caused the personality structure, it's caused some pain and some sadness and some grief, all of which is felt through. It's caused a lot of that, and it seems like it's just watching the death, the continued death of whatever's left here, whatever's identified as the TED structure. And what really struck me, that felt just like, yes, this, I don't blame anybody. The clearer we see through our own stuff, then the clearer that we begin to see that other people aren't there in what we would call a real form, that what we see as other people are also patterns, habits, and conditioning. And I don't mean to depersonalize in a dismissive way, not at all. As a matter of fact, what comes up out of it is a far greater sense of compassion, a love. It's like a love for the apparent brokenness of other people. And I think that started first with the love for the apparent brokenness of me, of here, of Ted. Had to be that way. Nobody's doing this thing. It's a movement. At best, it can be described as a movement. When that showed up, that sense of I don't blame anybody, that almost seemed to be a freedom. It didn't, it was a freedom to feel the whatever was felt there underneath, whether it was the sadness or the loneliness, without putting an extra, like a slice of blame on top of it. So it did not make the intensity of the emotions that were coming up at any particular point in time when they show up. It didn't reduce them at all, but they became more pure, if that makes any sense. It became an emotion that could just be felt. And there you might, I might see little stories attached to it, little narratives, but they were sort of irrelevant and inconsequential. I don't think we can start out me saying as a mantra of sorts, I don't blame anybody, that there's nobody here. I've always really challenged the assertions that there's nobody here. If that's the opening shot, if that's your opening statement, it can be quite dismissive. It feels like it's only half of the equation in this whole process. Yes, there's nobody here. There's no solid thing here. No fixed entity. There's no fixed perspective. And I suppose with people with more gentle dispositions or less trauma in their lives may be able to intuitively slide into that a little bit easily. But if there's trauma, there's extreme identification. If there's, sometimes it's just time. If you've been in the game for, if you're 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, I mean, there's some stuff that's cemented in there, include not just ideas and concepts, but emotions as well. The feeling through has to be felt and cannot and will not be dismissed away. The phrase popped into my head the other day that just because this is all that there is doesn't mean that it's all bliss. Doesn't mean that there won't be other emotions other than joy or happiness. Sadness, anger, rage, love, despair. There's room for it all, right? The magic here was in the releasing of blame. And I didn't do anything to release that. It was just at some point became very clear that there was no one else out there to blame. I don't blame anyone. That's it for today.